welcome to Marin Poets Live. I'm Neshama Franklin. I work at the Fairfax Library and I love poetry. So it's a special pleasure for me to share this opportunity to introduce you to poets from our county in the flesh, as it were, as they read and discuss their work. Monthly tapings will be broadcast on Marin TV and then become part of a special page on our website, along with biographies of the poets and links to our collection. This is a partnership with the Marin Poetry Center. A common thread throughout the programs will be discovering how living in Marin has influenced their poetry. Those of you who already love poetry will appreciate this direct transmission from the poet to the listener, you. Those who might think of poetry as esoteric or abstract will discover how it can sing when read aloud. For today's program, we will feature C.B. Follett and Kathy Evans. Welcome, Lynn, also known as C.B., your nom de poetry.
Thank you.
Okay.
Happy to be here.
Yes, we are delighted to have you. And so, as we do, we're developing a rhythm in this program. Give us first a poem that's rooted in Marin, if you would.
Well, I don't think this could be much more rooted in Marin. I wrote a series of poems about favorite rocks, and this is the final poem. It's called Tamalpais, the home rock. Out our house windows, or coming home from the cardinal points, it waits like a welcome lamp set against the sky. Fog hides it, seduces it, tickles it. Rain puts it behind a scrim, but it remains steadfast, yes. Large enough for awe, small enough for an afternoon hike, covered with evergreen and a seasonal blush of wildflowers. It catches rain clouds and shakes them loose of their harvest, and its creeks and rivers churn with water. Evening throws it into purple, sunlight casts it green and blue. While lower hills turn summer gold, it stays viridian and needled. And yet, despite this familiarity, it rises sacred against the sky, holding something back, something for the gods in us.
Oh, that is utter Mount Tam.
Isn't it?
Yes, it's absolutely beautiful. And I love the cardinal points, which pull us away and bring us back to it. So you see it out your window? I
see it out my window, but I particularly love it coming back from the north, coming in from Sonoma, or where the Sleeping Maiden is clearly delineated.
That's right. And I always go back to Japan, which I've never been to, because it's so kind of an echo of Fujiyama.
Yes, it is, isn't it?
Yes.
And it's very stately, I think.
Yes, it's stately, but not jagged. It's an embracing mountain, as you got in that poem. Right there. So home is which town?
Sausalito.
And have you been there a long time?
We've been there over 25 years.
Ah.
We came from the city, and I was delighted to be in the country.
Yes, that's great. Yeah. Before we get into any more of that stuff, let us bathe in some more poetry from you.
Okay. This is a poem about Limantour. We had a dog that loved to chase rocks, and that's all she wanted to do. So we went to Limantour Beach, and this is a poem that came out of that. The old dog celebrates, sniffs high, races to the water, and runs in a tight circle in the shallows. 2, 3, and then another. She lowers her shoulder to an Irish green swatch of sea lettuce. She will roll in it if she can, if we let her, and wear it as a badge of this day. A day she always dreams of by the fire, legs churning on the rug, a beach day. She can never get enough. Every beach is another notch in her dream time. She selects a rock, smooth and oval, carries it dangling from her mouth like a talisman. It is a digging rock. She drops it, chases it with her paws, poking her nose in to scent its trail. Her gray muzzle is thick with sand, her legs and around her eyes. Her tongue is sandpaper, coarse grit. By the third hole, she must sink to rest every 8 paw strokes or so, haunches perched on the slag of her own mining. We spend the whole day at the beach, marking the water's edge with a long line of holes and heaps. Tonight, While she runs before the fire, the tide will rise and replace all her divots.
Oh, what a wonderful series of images, partly because of the oldness of the dog and the youth embedded in her, which is going to come out like that. And then having her on the rug running.
Right.
You know, she is the dog of all her years in that package.
That's true, isn't it?
Yes. And I also love beach and notch and all those interior rhymes. Very joyous.
Thank you.
That dog must be gone now.
That dog is gone, and we have a new dog.
Oh, good. I wanted to hear that.
Doesn't care about rocks, but cares about being with us and running and being outside.
The new dog has her own territory, or his own territory.
Yes, he does.
Yes. So the city, was that the city of your birth? I mean, San Francisco?
I'm a Connecticut Yankee.
Oh, my goodness. And then how did you get out here? And
I met a lovely boy at college, which was in the East, and he was from out here. And so I we married, and I followed him out here.
That's still your lovely boy?
He's still my lovely boy.
Oh, what a
54 years later.
Thing. That's very, very good to hear. And between the nuptials and now you are, I presume, a full-time poet. Was there stuff in between? Like work? I mean, work for money.
Well, I did work, but that wasn't very interesting.
Okay.
Just leave that aside.
Okay.
I did, I always wanted to write, and I ran into a teacher at college who was very discouraging and was awful to everybody in our class. And so I stopped writing, and I didn't write again until I moved to Marin and took a class at College of Marin.
Well, that's both a tragic and a joyful story. And I somehow think that all that writing compressed in you.
Probably.
And then came out so fully.
Yeah.
And
so as a result, I tried all the different arts. I had years as a ceramic artist, and I tried weaving, and now I still do. I have an art studio up in San Rafael at Artworks downtown. And I have a photography group I belong to. Wow. So I have a tri-cornered hat. But the biggest try is poetry.
Yes, so let's have some more poems.
Okay. All right, this is another Marin poem called Bull Kelp. And it was written after we were forced to move from the city because we were house poor. We just had too big a house. And we didn't know where we were going to end up, and we had a lot of cleaning out to do. So I had taken a class in making baskets out of bull kelp. And I loved it, so I decided I was going to get some bull kelp myself. So this is called Bull Kelp. 1. Beyond South Beach, the bull kelp snap from their holdfasts and are carried away loose as fingers through the surf. Massive waves pound the steep slant of shore, their hum and growl shaking the sand into dense flanks. High tides and onshore wind fill the beach with the floats and rubbery stipes of bullwhips that turn to leather in the straight-on sun. Tugging at bleached white, amber, or raw sienna whips, I covered that beach, looking for color and length, while the dogs sectioned the sand with tracks, racing stripes of slather along their dark bodies. In the small convertible, I piled great snarls of kelp, backseat, front, the trunk, so that for the ride home the dogs had to nest in it like plump geese. 2. I put it in the basement with other basket material. Then came the year we lost so much and had to sell the house. Under deadline, I worked my way from the once children's rooms at the top to the someday room in the basement. A slag heap formed on the deck. Twice a week, the handyman came with his pickup and made a run to the dump. Shelves of beachcombing, art projects, rusted gears and sprockets, collage scraps, a shopping bag of broken car glass. There'd be no someday room wherever we were going, and so I came to the tangled kelp, hauled its cumbersome Gordian clump out onto the deck. 3. Its colors, its long tapered stalks, the goofy bald globes, stiff now, but still beautiful, brought that wild, wet, briny day on South Beach in like stormcombers. The sound returned, the joyful dogs, the straight line of beach that crammed its point into the Pacific. I dragged the whole knot off the pile and worked my way through, disengaging each whip, laying them out like exclamation points. I thought of the kelp gripping the subtidal bottom. There floats sometimes a fishing raft for heron. How great storms had caused them to lose their hold and follow the whim of tides. With razor-sharp scissors, I cut and saved every possible piece, and for the next 5 hours sat on the porch, dogs by my side, and made baskets, one after the other, working that salty weft around and around.
I love that. What is that, the Someday Room?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Oh, and so tell me, stipes. Where did you get that? And what is it?
Oh, isn't it a great word?
Yeah.
It's the official word for the tales.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So there is the talk of children in rooms.
Yes.
Are you tied up with those children now?
I am. We have three grown children and 3 grandchildren who are almost grown.
Yes.
And they're all of the grandchildren in one family, so the others have not done their part.
But they've done their part for the planet, so let's celebrate them.
Yes, they have.
Yes, but that's lovely to hear.
Yeah.
Yes. We have just a couple of minutes. So you can do a little, a kind of medium-sized poem, and then the last poem.
Okay. All right. Well, this is a rather early poem that I wrote at the College of Marin when I was first getting into poetry. And it's a poem I often read, and it seems to really resonate with the people who have been in this position of this poem. And they all come up afterward, whether they're the parents or the child. And it's called Anna. When she died, I picked up all her parts and rearranged them in me. Mother and father did not see. Eyes blurred with loss of promise, they tipped her below the frost line and thought all of her had gone. But, knowing of their needs, I soaked up Anna into my own peat, let her move with my bones, speak with my tongue, until by cell and thought she took me over. And though they knew they'd lost a daughter, they were forever wrong about which one.
That's kind of the poet's charge. You have done what poets need to do. And it's so mythical, refashioning her, relimning her. Let us have, and that's exquisite. It's a poem, an elegiac poem. It should go into one of those anthologies of grief and healing. So, a minute left.
Okay.
Your short and lovely poem.
I have a tiny little poem.
I'm tiny little, but we never want to cut it off. So your tiny poem now,
okay.
I receive.
All right. This is called Bolinas Lagoon. Many of you have seen this, I'm sure. Out of the marsh grass, seemingly empty, the white shawls rise into air and fly.
Beautiful Lynn Follett. Thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Okay. And I live across from the lagoon and see that all the time. And I'll see birds and no shawls. What you've done, you've made a link like that.
Wonderful.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much.
And in our 22 seconds left, you were Poet Laureate. You're the 4th on our shows.
That's
and
right.
we're very happy to have you.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Welcome, Kathy.
Hello.
Hi, I'm so glad to see you. And as we do, let's start with a Marin poem.
Okay. This takes place on the freeway, actually, coming out of Mill Valley to Corte Madera. Territory. I climb Horse Hill with a bucket of pears, one each for the roans and the gelding with its satin fetlock, haunch, swoosh of tail, all of them with such handsome manes. They roam the hills above the freeway, graze, and sometimes in late morning take off at full gallop across the ridge. This town has saved the hill for them, taken it back from the developers and the men on bulldozers. A rainbow appears just at the crest of the hill. The horses don't take notice. How many rainbows appear simultaneously over the earth? Do they hang above slaughterhouses, above mass graves, over terrorists? Do terrorists call themselves terrorists? A horse pulls from my hand the flesh of pear, snorts, and then shows me those big horse teeth. The cars below tell their own sad story at rush hour. Someone looks up from the carpool lane. We love territory. We die for it.
That's an amazing poem with its, there's, you know, whenever a rainbow shows up, I always think, Hallmark. But what you have the rainbow shining on and the thought of rainbows is amazing. And this is kind of our Marin. It's so ordinary and it's so magical. And yes. Also, when you zeroed in on those horses, they appeared before my very eyes like you were an artist making those horses into flesh. Oh. So it's a lovely, lovely poem.
Every time I pass that hill and I look up at those horses, and then I think we start with a bucket of pears, but we end up with the big problem of the territorial imperative, you know.
Exactly. And then we can always go back and sink our teeth into pears again and get some sweet solace.
Yes, absolutely. I love pears.
Good. I can hear that. Another poem, please.
Well, this is why I write. I write because I write to get the bad crazies out of my box head. I write to open my head box and let out all the stuff. Piñata woman that I am, small town woman that I am. I write to let myself speak to myself. Hey baby, what's shakin', girl? I write because I love particles and syllables, a cakewalk of cadences, and because sometimes I'm all balled up. So I write to hold steady, to unravel, to do time, to save time, or just for the fun of it, or just for the hell of it. I write for a new angle. I write for death, details, and love. Because love can explode, you know. It can send out lava chunks, hot love flying out to smack people in the head who stay in their heads. Yeah, I write in honor of stillness, to find out what is true and to sell to Byzantium.
Wow. That is just so amazing. It almost starts like a series of graphic images, like cartoons, and it has that kind of jaunty bit of nose thumbing at yourself and at the process. And then when you talk about honoring stillness, again, it brings it around to another place, and then you drop death in there. Whew, what a piñata.
What a piñata,
Yes.
I like that.
You are.
Well, people always ask you, why do you write?
Yeah.
You know? And I had a student once that said, she writes to get the crazies out of her head, and I just stole it and said, I like that line.
Right, and we are always stealing. It's the best kind of stealing.
It is.
Yes,
it
it's
is.
the celebration of that which works.
We share language.
We
That's
do.
what
We
do.
definitely do. So, as Lynn lives in Sausalito, you live in Sausalito too, I believe.
Do. I live on the houseboats.
Oh, for a long time.
Well, I lived there for about 15 years. And it's really quite a magical place, you know, with the light and the water and the birds. And then I thought, I need to go into the city and be urbanized a bit, and did. But when I came back to the houseboats, just recently, since November, I have just loved it. I feel like I returned home.
That's right. How can I miss you if you don't go away? It's that kind of...
Yes. Oh, it's just lovely to be back.
That's great. And then your trajectory from Sausalito, from whence? Way back.
Oh, from where did I come
whence
from?
did you
Or
come?
from whence did I
Yeah.
come? Utah, originally.
Oh, my goodness.
I lived just south of Salt Lake City on an amusement park with my father and his brothers owned an amusement park on a lake. So I had a very unusual upbringing.
Yes, does that amusement park creep into your poems?
Yes, it does.
Specifically?
Yes, it does. I've tried to write about it for years as a novel or something, but the poems keep popping out. I probably have one in here. It's, let me see.
This is kind of a poem as biography.
Poem as biography. Well, this one, it's a strange little poem, but it's almost like a photograph of memory. And on that amusement park, there was a Ferris wheel operator by the name of Hardy Baum. And I always loved his name, and it popped into this poem. It's a little dark, but I like it. Midway. Hardy Baum, the Ferris wheel operator, brought me, I think I was closest, one half of his finger in a greasy towel and set it down on the counter right next to the relishes and the colossal red cylinder of ketchup, the kind you have to pump. I had to look away, focus on the black fly stumbling through a spilled drop of orange snowcomb syrup. Carousel horses circled us with glass eyes, and the girls on the Rollo planes screamed. Heat rose up from the blacktop in waves. But what I remember most of that day were the smells, steamed Polish dogs, dead carp at the edge of the lake, and his laugh, Hardy Baum's laugh, or was it a cry, spiraling up, up, up from that tarred-over underworld.
Wow, and that is the quality of that kind of place. It is very dark, and it's bizarre because it's supposed to be celebration.
I know, and if you live there, you see the underside, the underworld of it all.
Definitely. Did you have to make a break from Utah vigorously, or did it slide?
I made a break. I got married and came to San Francisco, and then lived in San Francisco. And then moved to Marin.
Right.
So.
And do you look back upon Utah with connection and fondness, or with pleasant distance?
I think it's mixed. You know, it's an unusual community surrounded by mountains and Mormons, and it was rural for me until I went to the University of Utah. And I just was there a week ago for a funeral, and returned to the town where I lived and the graveside hill, and had a view of the whole valley, and people that I hadn't seen in 20 or 30 years were there. So it's very fresh in my memory right now, with those beautiful floaty clouds in the mountains, and there's something particular about Utah that is inside me, I think.
Yes, I sense that.
Besides the carnival atmosphere.
Yes, of course. Before our time runs out, another poem or two, please.
Okay, let's see. Well, here's a Utah poem. In the summer, I usually work in Las Vegas. I didn't this summer, but this is Crossing the Line in southern Utah. Listening to Credence Clearwater right outside of Mesquite. It's barely green here, but Cedar Pocket is just up ahead, the bluffs and the buttes rising in big slabs of time. The fingerings, the riffs. Maybe life is just the next 3 miles up, with a lingering song on the radio, the signal still within reach. The clouds seem taped up. Where would you be without love, sing the Doobie Brothers. All I know is I'm behind a truck called the Earth Roamer, an ex-VLT headed straight for the Virgin River, where water runs muddy red almost to a trickle, and heat shimmers, and the soaring broadwings fly in on cue. There's an old pickup by the port of entry, but you can't pull in until the lights are flashing. I've crossed the corners of 3 states and not a model home yet. Just distance and the desert, where it's safe to go into time alone, or with Fleetwood Mac and the Gypsy, lightning once, maybe twice, the heart no longer a walled-in city, the mind traveling toward the next rest stop with its blue sign that promises no services. Pleased to meet you. Hope you guess my name.
Oh, that's very, very fine. And so I love our straddle from Marin to Utah, and how embedded it is in you. It's a wonderful, wonderful kind of tension almost.
Yes, it is. Place is important in poetry.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I like to write poems about a particular place and just be in it for a minute or an hour and just absorb what that place has to tell you. You know, I think
that's part of your process. You know,
kind
people
of
always
like
want to know, where do they come from?
Yeah,
so
just
you're
you can
telling
be
us.
on the freeway and look up at Horse Hill, and then a poem will start.
Yes.
First.